Hi, and welcome to another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm your host, Chris Wells, VP of R&D at Indico Data, and I am very excited to introduce you to my guest, Michelle Govea of Sandbox Industries. Michelle?
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Oh, I'm really good. Better now that you're here. How's your day going?
Good so far. It's no complaints. Starting to warm up over here in Connecticut. You're in Boston, so you're familiar.
Yeah, I'm actually in Philly, so it's
Oh,
even
you're in
better.
Philly.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Apologies for that.
just down the coast. No, it's fine. I'm not sure whether Boston is an insult to Philadelphians or not, and whether it goes the other way. But we're not going to cover that ground here on the podcast.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I am an employee at Sandbox Industries. That's a venture capital firm that is based out of Chicago. I joined that firm about 4 years ago. In doing that, brand new to VC and that whole world. I spent 8 years prior to that working in the insurance industry. So you've talked to a lot of folks in the industry. You probably know no one really goes into it purposefully. I kind of fell into it. I am born and raised Hartford County, Connecticut, and so insurance capital of the world. Very easy to just find yourself working at one of those big carriers, which is what happened straight out of school. So I did 4 years at Travelers and then literally crossed the bridge across the street and did another 4 years at Hartford Steam Boiler, which is a subsidiary of Munich Re. So, big insurance nerd, I guess, by default. So that's a little bit about professional me leading up to Sandbox. Personal me, like I said, born and raised in Connecticut, still living here. I'm big soccer fan, a new mom, and
Congrats.
thank you. And yeah, just enjoying what I get to do every single day at work. So,
Right
and
on.
obviously joining a podcast is part of that. So thanks for having me.
Well, good. I hope it's minimally painful. It's funny, I remember being a kid, ancient history at this point, but I grew up in the Rust Belt, and it was like, well, what are the possible jobs? You could work on a firehouse, you could be a police officer, a lawyer, doctor, and work in a factory. That was the list. And the space of careers now is so much bigger. And you mentioned falling into insurance. It seems like insurance is actually becoming sort of, I think it's an up and coming career path, right?
Yeah, there's so when I got my MBA, I did it at University of Hartford, again,
Yeah.
stayed local. That they didn't have it then, but I'm aware of now. They have a specific track that's focused on insurance. So it's very much as you mentioned, growing into a purposeful career path
Yeah.
for folks. But yeah, as you said, what I was familiar with was I have family members that worked at an insurance company or at a bank. And then, some manufacturing plants here in Connecticut as well. But that was my world, right? And so you go to college and you're like, well, I could major in math or English, but eventually I'll probably get back to one of those big corporations. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And insurance is like something I've learned as I've worked with insurance companies in the last 5 or 6 years is it's a broad umbrella. You can insure just about anything.
you can insure just about anything, and then even within insurance, you can. There's so many different roles, right? I think traditionally when people say, "Oh, I
Mhm.
work in insurance," they think of you being as an insurance agent or insurance broker, not
Yeah.
that you're an underwriter or someone that works in. And maybe you think about the claims representatives because that's who you as a consumer touch on the insurance side. But
Yep.
the actuaries, the compliance shops, it's such a diverse world in terms there's any number of roles that you can do within insurance that's not purely just on the product selling side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's some of the most sophisticated organizations in the world. You were talking about actuaries. Actuaries are the original data scientists, right? And so there's an incredible amount of sophistication in insurance. I love it.
Yeah.
Good. So you kind of left insurance and went to venture capital. Why? Why did you do that?
Well, sort of, and I'll explain the sort of. So,
Yeah.
Sandbox as a firm has a strategy to launch investment funds in highly regulated industries. So where you have these large incumbents that are protected by things like the regulatory environment or their capital requirements, but that are interested in partnering or are gatekeepers to innovation within those industries, right? So that they're interested in bringing in new technologies and capabilities to help them gain market share or competitive advantage. And so within Sandbox, we started off just about 20 years ago in the VC space, started off in the healthcare sector. Following that, launched a food and agriculture technology fund. And then in 2019, had the first closing of the Sandbox InsurTech Ventures Fund, which is focused on the P&C or property and casualty and life insurance industry. So I got to know the team that was launching that at the firm around that time. And so because of the insurance expertise that I had from my roles, was able to join, got the opportunity to join. So I left the insurance like bubble in terms of working at an insurance company, but very much still part of the insurance industry and the landscape. Just doing some work with some really cool companies that are trying to change the industry. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize, you're talking about heavily regulated, and clearly healthcare is heavily regulated, food and drugs. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's an extra layer of complication with insurance, which is every state regulates it. It's okay. It's not quite true, but roughly speaking, every state regulates it differently.
Well, I think it's like 56 different jurisdictions, even so outside of just the 50 states, right? And they vary. It's not just a check the box that they have their own and it's a similar process. They each have different processes, different relationships with each of the carriers, different requirements that they have in place for how you price a product, how you sell a product, what products are even available to be sold. So it is quite a challenge to navigate for sure. Yeah, very, very highly regulated industry, which to your point, people I think don't always appreciate.
Yeah, highly and granularly regulated. But I mean, that must create a ton of opportunity for the companies that you're talking to.
It does. Absolutely. And when we think about the insurance industry or the insurance value chain and kind of where we're looking at companies, it's end to end, and there's a number of opportunities within each of those links in the value chain, whether it's new product development or how you distribute those new products, just even in underwriting, so data and analytics, and how do you streamline that process? How do you improve back office operations and enhance the roles that people have so that they're not doing the mundane data entry type work, but can really do the analytics and understand some of the drivers of what they're seeing. And then obviously everything that you have on the claim side, whether that's reduction in the severity of a claim, a reduction in the frequency at which a claim would be filed, and then obviously the customer engagement and the relationship that you have with them there. And that's just within the insurance industry. Then insurance entity, then you've got the brokers and the agents that are doing the distribution, those partnerships, and then on the back end, the reinsurance entities and their relationships and interconnectivity. So it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's a big space. There's quite a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is you see an opportunity across the entire ecosystem. It's not just within the insurers themselves, but everything that's adjacent.
Absolutely, and it's all connected. So improving something for one of those usually has an effect on improving the workflows or the interconnectivity between all of the entities.
Okay. I have many questions. I'm going to put a pin in that for now. I want to spend a little bit of time and let you further credential yourself as a self-proclaimed insurance nerd. What did you do specifically in the insurance space before you sort of made the jump?
Yeah, so I think of my past as two buckets, right? The Travelers bucket and then the Hartford Steam Boiler bucket, just because they were two very different roles. So at Travelers, and ironically spent 4 years at both. So at Travelers, it was in their agency management group, and so it was a very operational role. It was part of their compliance shop. So the job there was ensuring that all of the agents that were appointed or wanted to write travelers' business were able to do so legally. So they had their insurance license in place, which to your point, require them to be licensed in multiple states if they wanted to sell insurance in multiple states. And then as a result of that, what indemnity products could they sell? And so validating that they had all of the right paperwork and documentation in place. And then as part of that as well, within that group, very often insurance agencies and brokerages are getting acquired and rolled up or merging with others. And so ensuring that internally within the travelers, that those records were all in sync so that the right agent was assigned to the right agency so that we could ensure that commissions were being paid correctly and that the relationship managers there had all the details at their fingertips of who is writing our business.
Okay. So I'm much more familiar from my past life with the breakdown of, sort of roles in banks. Would you consider, was this a back office role in an insurance company? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Yep. On the same page.
And so that was what I did there. I spent my 4 years within that department in a variety of roles, eventually growing into kind of the head of the knowledge management initiative there. So
interesting.
Procedures, understanding the work itself, and then collaborating with the actual business unit. So the personal lines teams or the commercial lines teams to just think about how to streamline some of the work requests that they were sending in, their submissions, and improving the workflow there. And that really got me interested in stepping away from the day-to-day, like blocking and tackling of this is what we have to get done, and thinking about the strategy on how do we just improve this overall process. And so that was really the catalyst to me finding a role that was more tailored to strategy. So I took a strategic initiatives manager role at Hartford Steam Boiler after that. So literally they're across the street from each other. So the same pathway to work and everything like that. That's how locked in Hartford, Connecticut is.
No, I mean, you throw a rock, you hit an insurance company, and that's
there you go. But be careful because a lot of them have glass everywhere. So you want to be careful.
Of course. I'm sure it's well insured.
Yes, very, very well insured. So at Hartford Steam Boiler, I took the strategic initiatives manager role within their business strategy and execution team, which was honestly, and it was great for me, kind of a catch-all for a lot of different things. So essentially, I was tasked with working on initiatives that were enterprise-wide or executive-led, and so one of the first ones that I worked on was launching a new product into the market. So I worked with the product team to help draft the policy document. I worked with the policy administration group to get those into the policy administration system, and got to know how to draft requirements and represent the business on a lot of those business to IT conversations. That was one. I did help with their implementation of a new core system, which
oh boy,
is a big task and never ever goes according to plan, but was a great learning experience as well. And then towards the second half of my time there, really spent a lot of time focused on innovation initiatives within the company. So actually ran with a colleague of mine a company-wide Shark Tank event, which actually led to someone's idea being worked on for 6 to 8 months and becoming realized. Worked on that. And then part of my role was, again, the kind of the executive sponsored work. I was not a part of that group there, but HSB partnered with Munich Re Ventures often. And so any companies that they invested in that were strategic to Hartford Steam Boiler, or that Hartford Steam Boiler went out and found and wanted to partner with, whether it was that HSB has a reinsurance model as well. So they offer a lot of services to their reinsurance partners. So sometimes it was companies that HSB wanted to work with internally. Sometimes it was partnering so that it could provide services or different capabilities to its reinsurance partners. I was the relationship manager for those insurtechs coming in. So I would work with the business to identify
this is starting to come together for me.
To identify the need. Usually run some type of POC or pilot internally, capture those metrics, report out to the executive team on what we were seeing. After a period of time, eventually help with the recommendation of either up or out in terms of contract with them or build this into our process. And then as that decision was made, if the decision was to work with them, then work with the business to say, this is the solution we have. How do we operationalize it internally? How does it fall into the workflow? What are the new procedures and processes that we have to follow? And then, manage that for a portion of time until it becomes just part of the day to day.
Yeah, I want to pull that thread and then come back to that train of thought, because that sort of tells us how you got to Sandbox a little bit. You foreshadowed it, but insurance companies are notoriously highly siloed organizations. So how did you break those log jams to get you're talking about a new core system, right? That touches like everyone. How do you accomplish that in a siloed organization?
So I think a big part of it is that, again, as I mentioned, it was, and a core system always is going to be, right, some executive level strategic priority initiative. And so there's just a general consensus of this has to get done. And so on the core system implementation, for example, I represented the business on that. So it was more of, here are our requirements. Here's the requirements list. What are the capabilities of the system? We can do this, we can't do this. Now go back to the business. How does that impact what we want to do? And in the instance of that particular project, the goal was to launch the new product, to have the new product be the first one on that core system to just avoid a lot of the legacy, which would come later, integrating all of the legacy from other existing systems. So there was a little bit of a lift on that. But yeah, it's getting together a lot of people. It's a lot of it's project management work, a lot of it, right? It's identifying the key stakeholders, who are the decision makers, and then just tracking very closely how things are progressing, working with their teams as well, and just pushing through it. Honestly, yeah.
Just grit your teeth and get through. Okay. So at the end of your sort of insurance proper career, you spent a lot of time, trying to stress test new technologies in the insurtech space. What lessons did you take with you to Sandbox?
Actually, that was a big part of why I joined Sandbox, was the lessons that I had learned as part of those projects, and that was my ability to say, in vetting or looking at a company, they are aware of the challenges. They know what it'll take, or how long it'll take to sell into an insurance company to implement their solution. What are the challenges they will hit up against internally, whether it's procurement, whether it's because they're requiring a change in behavior, they're going to hit up against this type of challenge, or it's a systems challenge. And this was the start of API connectivity being kind of table stakes, but how do you integrate? How does the data get exchanged back and forth? So being able to, one, understand that those questions needed to be asked, and then two, asking while talking to a company, being able to weed out those that seem to understand the industry and the challenges that they face, and added a little bit of credibility to their ability to sell into the insurance industry, because it is a challenge. Part of that too is understanding who buys it, right? You may be working with a business unit who's very interested, but then if they hit up against an IT budget where that's not priority, it's an uphill battle. And so just being able to speak to a lot of that. And then just for myself, I was the switch that clicked with Sandbox was, I was starting to wonder about, I'm making these recommendations to senior management about, I think we should partner with this company. And then I hope the company's here a year and a half from now when we've incorporated their entire solution into our workflow. And if not, what are the contingencies that we have in place? How reliant are we? on what they're providing us to get things done. So there's a lot of those questions going around. I just got very interested in what does it take for these companies to continue to exist. And so step in Sandbox, and 4 years later, here we are.
Gosh, you have like insurance in your bones. Like
fell into it though.
Yeah, so funny. It's very natural. All right, so how do you advise startups to like really understand insurance? Like, what do you say? What should they do to really go out and understand? Here's how things work at an insurance company. Because I've worked with and for a lot of different industries across my finance and now AI career, and insurance is almost like tribal. Like you got to speak the lingo. You know, you have to have that right mindset. It's just very, very different. So how do you advise companies just, get smarter about these things?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You definitely need to understand or have empathy for the pain points and what they're trying to solve. Understand the day-to-day there's a lot of acronyms, right? And it's hard even within the industry to know all of them, especially because, as you mentioned, sometimes or often in the insurance industry, the groups are siloed, but also I worked at Travelers for 4 years.
Yeah.
And this is probably, well, I'll admit it out there. Didn't really know what reinsurance was until I joined Hartford Steam Boiler, because my world just didn't touch reinsurance, right? That wasn't my part of my job at Travelers. And so there's just so much that you learn as you go, taking different roles, being exposed to different people within the industry. And so what we try to bring to our companies is an understanding of what are these people in the insurance companies trying to accomplish, right? When you're talking to an IT person, what are their goals? If you're talking to the chief underwriting officer, that's gonna differ. This is what they care about, right? What does the chief claims officer care about? One of the things that's really interesting, though, that we're seeing is probably when InsurTech really took off as a subsector in broader fintech, and this is there's been a lot of great work done. I think what we saw as a first tranche of InsurTech or startup activity was entrepreneurs that were on the receiving end of the insurance experience, right? You saw a lot of claims type solutions. You saw a lot of just I'm going to change how you buy insurance, or because it's the consumer's perspective. What we're seeing now, and so to your question, Chris, of there's a little less explaining we have to do, because we're seeing a lot of industry veterans starting companies. They've been in the companies, they understand the challenges, and they've seen, or they have an idea that they think can improve what they have experienced. And so you're seeing a lot of CEOs or co-founders or founders that are spent 15 years working in the insurance industry or in the financial services sector, and that there's a correlation to what they're trying to solve for. So it's a little bit of both, but I think generally entrepreneurs are getting better at understanding what is the goal that an insurance company has, what is the outcome that they're seeking, whether it be in the underwriting space, how do they select risks, how do they process their claims, how do they improve the customer experience. So it's a lot of just helping them navigate, who are you selling to, what are you really trying to help them accomplish, and then selling the company value proposition in that lens.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. So the struggle previously had been helping these founders to figure out what's painful so that you can sort of do the value engineering, right, to build out the sales process. But now you're saying that the company, as insurance companies are going through this digital transformation phase, there are a lot of folks that are, they actually have an understanding. They're leaving the insurance companies to found the InsurTechs. I think you're saying that's the trend that you're seeing.
That exactly, and on that first wave, it's even just understanding. You might understand the pain point, but you might not understand why it's a pain point. And it's not that insurance companies are resistant to change or slow to change because they're stubborn. There are reasons, right? It's the regulatory reasons. It's how ingrained their systems are, or even how siloed they are, and all the workarounds that they've built in order to do that. There's a lot of data, a lot of legacy information locked in there, and so it's never as simple as flipping a switch, to turn something off and turn something on. I think over time, we've seen just a recognition and appreciation of that, which translates to insurance companies being much more willing to partner because they feel that these companies understand their challenges and are willing to work with them, as opposed to disrupting them and trying to replace them.
Great. I want to double click in really deeply on two things that sort of span all of the different flavors of insurance, which are underwriting and claims. So I want to do a deep dive there. But first, so I was in financial services, 6-7 years ago, and we talked to a lot of insurance companies, particularly life companies, because they, I was in risk management and they do a lot of derivatives, right? And all the way back then, everyone was talking about digital transformation in insurance. And from what I could see, no one was doing it. And I don't think that's true today. So what happened in that intervening period that has, it's really, feels like the insurance industry is on fire in a good way right now. People are actually doing these things. So what changed?
I think, so you ask a very interesting question. The way I think about it is digital transformation is not a one size fits all term. And so you've got companies at various stages of a transformation, right? I think originally what early days of digital transformation was everyone's got these homegrown systems that are from the 70s and the 80s, and you're doing data entry on green screens, and a digital transformation is just building a front end for that, right? So that you have an example that's an example of that. You've got a number of probably the tier one larger insurance carriers that have gone through the full digital transformation of ripping and replacing out their core system, right? So they've got these new policy administration systems, new claim systems, new billing systems. So that was the second wave of digital transformation, is just lifting up the core system underneath that makes the insurance carrier move day to day. And even on the broker and agency side, right? That's also the same. You've got the homegrown systems that you then have one or two kind of industry standards that people are moving towards. And then you've got the digital transformation that comes after that. Now we've got this shiny new system in place. What are all the capabilities that we can do, whether it's out of the box or what can we plug in now? Now the API connectivity is table stakes. Like what can we connect with to improve the improvements we've already made? And so there's companies at various stages of their digital transformation. And I think what we're seeing is companies, startups, for example, that are willing also to meet these companies where they are. I think initially there was this push to, this is our solution. We're technologically savvy. We built this great thing. It's so easy to work with us. You just have to have X. And a lot of times the insurance carriers would say, well, we don't have X. We're still on letter G, or something like that. And so over time, there's been just a more of a collaboration to say, this is where we are. Okay, this is how I can provide my service or my solution to you. And then over time, these companies are just continuing to improve where they are in their quote unquote digital transformation. That's how I think about it. I don't think it's a one size fits all. And it varies on the size of the carrier. It just means different things to different groups, I think.
Yeah, size of the carrier, the actual business the types of risk that they have appetite for. Yeah. Exactly. Interesting. So same question, but on the VC side of things, like, everyone talks about smart money. Has the InsurTech VC money gotten smarter alongside all of this?
I like to think we're always smart from the get-go.
No, Sandbox for sure.
Obviously. I think so. There's so many different types of companies out there that you can invest in. And this goes back to my point earlier of the ecosystem is so large, and you can be a generalist that wants to play just across the board. And even so, a fintech investor that has one or two investments in the insurtech space just because there's overlap there. Or you have some funds that are very specific. Some of them are mostly interested in investing in specific business models or specific capabilities. So, in the insurance space, managing general agent as a business model, right? Someone that holds the pen from the insurance carrier that can do some of the underwriting themselves, on behalf of the carrier. That's a whole business model that you have MGAs for all lines of products that are either trying to distribute products differently, are going after a very niche portion of the market, changing up how the products are structured. You may have some teams that are solely focused on even providing capacity to those MGAs or investing in them as a business model, and that's solely where they're focused. You have others that are really interested in the claim space, or in the services and the tools that surround something, right? Like you could be an insurtech investor that's really focused on the cyber insurance market, and so cyber MGAs, cyber security solutions. It can be very, very focused, or you can take a step back and play in different areas. So I think the definition of investing in insurtech has grown. It's not just someone that's distributing products. It's a whole swath of companies that can fall under that insurtech bucket, I think.
Okay, that's interesting. I promised I would double click on claims and underwriting, so now is the time. You talked a lot about pain points and insurtechs getting smarter about those pain points. Everyone's got to underwrite, right? That's how you get the money in the door. Everyone's got claims, unfortunately. Take it in whichever order you want, but what are the pain points there? And how are you seeing those being addressed by tech solutions?
Yeah, so I'll start with underwriting, just from a workflow perspective, for my brain. But I'll take it from the lens of where we're seeing a lot of entrepreneurial activity, because that for us is an indicator of what are the problems that the industry is trying to solve. And core to actually both underwriting and claims, at least in my perspective, our perspective, is data. And it's not just data existing, but it's leveraging that data to make key business decisions. Then behind that, having an underlying technology that helps achieve those desired outcomes. So there's an exchange of data anytime that there is a submission to an insurance carrier, right? Either if it's,
so someone says this is, I want this kind of insurance. Here's my risk profile as captured in various documents. That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Exactly. Right. And they could do that directly online. If primarily if you're in personal lines and you're online on a website trying to put in for home or auto insurance, you could do it through your agent or your insurance broker, right? But all it is a collection of data. What we've seen a rise in is partnerships with third-party data vendors to streamline that process. So as opposed to you, Chris, having to put in every single thing about your property, if you put in your address, it's now asking you verifying questions, right? As opposed to saying, how do you heat your house? It's, do you heat your house with oil? Is this correct? Or you heat your house with gas? Is this correct? And so that they're pulling that from third-party data sources, all to streamline, and then also validate and authenticate the data that they're getting as accurate to improve their underwriting and their risk selection.
Interesting.
So we're seeing a lot of that, and what comes with that is the automation standpoint, right? Then that's less having to double check that information when it comes in, whether it's by email, PDF, Excel document, and then having the technology underneath. In some cases, if it's what we call low complexity, high frequency type of underwriting. So pretty standard characteristics, like, you're going to write this, it's pretty standard. Here's your general pricing. Being able
some
to
healthy 22-year-old is going to get a life policy because their parents said, you're an adult now, you should have a life policy, right? That kind of thing. And do they meet these characteristics to say, this we don't need an underwriter to spend 3 hours vetting the documentation that's come in and writing it. We can streamline that through and auto generate a policy, for example, and that occurs across all lines of business. It could. Especially the early, if you get into middle market insurance, which is more complex and has a lot of different lines, that's a little bit different. But same general theme of how do you aggregate the data to help you make faster, more effective, efficient decisions along that process. Yeah, I think that part makes sense. One thing I wasn't anticipating that is the sort of like where also are the decisions that we could just not make, right? Just have the machine, whatever that is, make that decision. That sounds like a regulatory nightmare, and I want to come back to that. But I also wanted to make the point that one of the great things about having humans do all of this is that humans are exceptionally good at exception handling. And so
Yes.
as I'm filling out this, how do you heat your home? If someone types in, I burn plastic, in my fireplace, a human will know what to do with that, whereas a machine is going to struggle. So how do you keep the right amount of flexibility while not keeping so much flexibility that everything is a one-off and you waste a bunch of everyone's time?
Yeah, and so that's the key question, right? It's you can't fully automate everything because you need those eyes and that assessment. But the goal is to get away from having everything be manual, right? And I think that the balance that we're seeing now between what insurance carriers are willing to either outsource or buy versus build in terms of partnering with companies. And what the startups are looking to do is the startups are not looking to replace or the human. They're looking to enhance the role that human plays in the overall workflow. And so you can heighten the output and the work that someone does if they're analyzing the more complex stuff instead of spending hours a day just I'll call it pushing paper, right? How do you automate and improve the paper, people, and processes within an insurance company? And that's really what I think we look for in companies and solutions. And so I'll go back to your regulatory nightmare side.
Yeah, please.
Yes, it is a nightmare. And that's part of why a lot, when introducing these technologies and these decision-based solutions, you have to have that lens. You have to understand why an insurance company would not automate a specific portion, as simple, quote unquote, as it sounds. And a lot of those too, that the system is written based on rules that follow the regulatory requirements. So in terms of what variables can you use to price an insurance product, right? How do you make sure that there's no biases in how you're doing risk selection? All of that comes from the models, the rules-based engines that are built into these systems that are driven by the regulatory requirements. And those are going to differ by state, right? Like one state might say you can't use this factor in your rating, but another one can allow it. And so that's the complexity that's why it takes, so long sometimes to implement or fully integrate. But that's just the reality of the business and the landscape.
It's got me wondering if these insurance regulations do you ever run into cases where the insurance regulations themselves need human judgment to be interpreted? Or is it usually stuff that you could just program into a system?
That's a great question. I don't know the in-depth data. It depends. It probably varies by product line and state. I do know, I remember from my time at HSB that I remember the amount of back and forth that the teams had to do with the states to say, we're filing this product, right? And then the states would come back with exceptions or rules, or you have to handle it this way. And then you respond with your rationale. So there's a lot of back and forth. So to answer your question, there's definitely a lot of human touch that goes into it in terms of how the system gets done. If it can't be boiled down to just a algorithm, it probably does always pop out for human touch. And that was my point on the middle market side. Usually you have multiple lines of business being underwritten by multiple underwriters for a variety of insurance limits and things like that. So you do probably have to have multiple people touching that, validating that, and then it goes back to the insurance broker in most cases, and then they're assessing that against other solutions too. So there is always going to be a human component, I think. It's just a matter of how do you automate as much of that as you can to enhance what that human is able to produce.
100%. All right, I want to jump ahead to claims in a second, but I also there were a couple things I wanted to highlight. that AI and technology are making the human knowledge workers' jobs better. That is such a consistent theme across this podcast. And I think people are still writing the AI is going to take your jobs and take over control of the human race thing. It's just silly. Like those people don't actually know anything about AI and what's practical. So I'm glad you highlighted that. That's great.
Yeah. Glad
it sounds like
highlighting that one.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
It sounds like on the underwriting side, the if I can boil it into a nutshell, the idea is get the right data in front of a person as fast as possible. And that might be zero data, right? In cases where you can just sort of, quote to bind, nothing in the way. Okay. So, and then the last thing I wanted to say is I don't burn plastic in my fireplace. That was not a cry for help. I'm doing fine, in case anyone was worried. Okay. Speaking of fires, talk to me about claims. Where's the pain? What solutions are you seeing? Like, what's going on there?
No surprise, there's a lot of activity happening in the claim space, and you can tackle the general you can tackle claims in a variety of ways, right? There's To your point, there's the AI and machine learning type solutions that can help aggregate data, help you identify trends and patterns in your claims that will ultimately help identify things sooner in a workflow, may also flow back and improve your underwriting decision making if you've got it, if you're sitting on all, because the one thing in insurance carriers, right, they own all of that claims data, and so they're the ones that can go through that and look to see patterns and trends. They're sitting on a lot of it. There's a lot of insights there that I think still need to be pulled out. So that's one area. There's also just how do you improve the claims workflow from a customer engagement standpoint, right? So that comes down to portals and systems to file a claim, tracking the status of your claim, the payouts of those claims, right? And the billing associated with that. That's all kind of claims workflow solutions. There's, the elements of fraud detection from a claim standpoint. So from the lens of the carrier, is this a fraudulent claim? How do we validate that? How do we verify that this actually occurred? So lots of different elements there. And then you've got just taking a step back, the general goal of reducing the frequency of claims events and reducing the severity of claims events. And so when you think about those two things, that opens up the world to be less about a solution that sits within the insurance carrier and can be risk mitigation solutions. So if you think about the wildfires in the US or even globally, right? What are some things that insurance carriers can offer their insureds to help make their homes or their properties safer? What are the tools that we can provide people? What are the resources that we can send out to let them know when there's a storm coming? How quickly can we as an insurance carrier respond to a catastrophic event and reach out and have that policy be activated? So it whole world for claims, and depending on where you want to find a solution, there's a number of pathways. We've seen a lot of companies doing, and even things like telematics and the pathway to autonomous vehicles, and how does that impact how claims are, and will that reduce the frequency of claims? Theoretically it will, right? But then if there is a claim, who's at fault? And so thinking about just the policies and who's liable in those instances, it's claims is a fascinating area of the insurance space, especially when you think about all the ways that entrepreneurs are tackling it.
It's so funny. You don't think of regulation as being a place that would attract entrepreneurs, but it's ripe. It's absolutely ready for it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think you highlighted some themes that are common between underwriting and claims, right? Just the need for the right data to be in the right place. Someone has to make a decision, so get them to that point quicker. The sort of insurance plus stuff that you're mentioning was not something that I have thought of. And now I'm wondering if my healthcare company should be buying HelloFresh and sending me food every week as a part of my premium, right?
Right. Yeah.
You forget that these things, even they're so deeply connected, especially in the healthcare space, you are the risk. And so
Yeah.
Of course, the insurance company should be involved in the risk mitigation piece of it. So that's fascinating. I hadn't thought of that.
And there's, there's outside of that, going back to internally, right? There's the so how do you identify the right risk mitigation tools, right? Data.
Yeah.
What data do you have to identify that this property is sitting in a location that would benefit from this risk mitigation tool? And then how do you internalize that and say that, this is data that I can now use to identify risk accumulation in my model. So if there was a catastrophic event from an insurance carrier standpoint, how at risk am I? Because 75% of all of my properties are in this area, which if it gets hit by a wildfire, catastrophic losses, right? So there's just all of that to take into consideration, and there's entrepreneurs finding a solution in each of those stages, which is really fascinating.
Interesting. Okay, this is blowing my mind wide open. There's so much here. I want to get back into some nitty gritty. How are you seeing companies like on the insurance side measuring the success of onboarding these new technologies, whether it's for automation or it's for analytics? Like, what are the trends there in terms of measuring success?
Yeah, I think early days, a lot of it was based on what is the technology that I have, right? Like early days. So I have this new shiny technology that can do all of these things. That this is going to change, our workflows, what we can do. What we're seeing now is it's less about the technology and more about the business outcome that technology helps to drive, or that solution helps to drive.
Okay.
So, from an underwriting standpoint, how many more submissions can we process? Right? Like how much more business can we get through? How many more claims can get reviewed? Or how much faster do those claims get closed because we've introduced this component into our workflow? So it's really business outcomes. It's that's really the key. So when we talk to our companies, it's yes, you should highlight the technology and all the work and the capabilities that are there, but to sell an insurance carrier, insurance company on the solution, it's what can you help them achieve?
Yeah. What's different
in a nutshell?
Yeah. What's different about my business tomorrow when I turn on your solution and get everybody using it?
Exactly. And to be fair, like if you are if you implement a technology and it's core to a workflow, it's probably very sticky, right? It's going to be really hard to kind of rip and replace that out. But there is a little bit of a component of loyalty to this company understands what my challenges were, helped work with me, and I've seen actual validated results from this. And so why would I change if what I have is proven to be working? And so that's I think the key is it's the technology is important, the capabilities are important. You should absolutely sell that, but it's what does that technology help achieve that in my opinion makes the difference and what carriers are looking for in terms of the ROI when they make an investment or partner with a company.
Yeah. All right. So all you InsurTech entrepreneurs out there, business impact, focus there, figure out what is the business and what is the impact. Good. All right. I drilled in real deep on underwriting and claims. Was there something else I should have drilled in on? Because I'm not an insurance nerd. I'm an aspiring insurance nerd, but I'm not there yet.
You're doing great.
Thanks.
And I think you hit on it. I think the underlying thing to all of that though is data. And so appropriately it's how does data impact underwriting and how does it impact claims? But it's data in general in the insurance space is a fascinating area because there's so much of it but so much of it that's underutilized or not utilized. Like what are the insights that, as I mentioned, right, an insurance carrier has the most granular claims data. It owns that data. What insights can be pulled from that to help drive underwriting results, to help identify when a claim comes in with certain characteristics, it should be elevated quickly because it could become catastrophic or costly or vice versa, or it comes in and you can get through it quickly because it meets these three standards. And so for us, we spend a lot of time. It's data vendors. So what new data is accessible that will help improve these workflows? What data already exists but is inaccessible internally? And so how do you access that and then make it usable so that it can help drive business decisions and business outcomes?
Interesting. It raises the question in my mind, especially the data aspect of things. Like insurers notoriously, I mean, nobody likes to share their data, but are there opportunities in the industry for, maybe data exchanges or some, something along those lines that sort of could be a tide that raises all boats in the industry?
So there is ISO exists where there is some level of reporting that goes in, and they're kind of the standard. They help set pricing standards and policy language standards and things like that. But to your point, it's if an insurance carrier captures 100 points of data, they're probably reporting just a subset of that, right?
Exactly.
Which is not a knock on it. That's just the requirements, right? They're compliant with what they're supposed to do, but there is a level of what competitive advantage can they achieve by having that data as well. But to be said, the cyber insurance is all things considered, a recently new product line. When it first got launched, there was a lot of questions about what is the right cyber insurance coverage? What are the things that matter? And those things change, right? There's business interruption, there's ransomware is what everyone sees in the headlines, right? Having data available to say, these are the instances where cyber insurance needs to be responsive, or these are the cyber incidents that are occurring, help with product innovation and making sure that the right things are being insured and available to the consumer. So yes, there is definitely value to sharing elements of data to improve the industry as a whole.
Okay, now I want you to pull out the crystal ball, and this will be the finale here. Okay. Where's the insurance industry? And that's it's an umbrella, right? So if you want to focus on different parts, that's fine as well if you want to make it tighter scope. But where's the insurance industry headed in the next few years? We've got this massive digital transformation and technologies are popping up overnight. Where are we going?
Yeah, that is a massive question. Let's see.
It's fine. You can take up to 3 minutes to answer it.
Perfect. Yeah. No pressure. I think I recently heard from a conversation that I was having with an entrepreneur that in the past, the insurance space has differentiated. Insurance companies have differentiated themselves from a product standpoint by being more niche or more complex in their coverage, right?
Yep.
That there's a shift happening where the consumer is demanding simpler solutions and simpler offerings. So, gone are the days, and I can attest to this because I helped write some. Gone are the days of very long, lengthy policy documents with long lists of exceptions where you have to you need a law degree to try and figure out what's covered and what's not, right? I think there's a shift towards very plain vanilla, understandable. This is what your policy covers. This is what it doesn't. So I think in general, a move towards simpler, more consumable products for the consumer. And as a result of that, simpler, more streamlined interactions to occur with that consumer. So whether it's, you saw in Personalized the trend of direct to consumer selling of insurance products, right? There's different schools of thought on whether the small commercial industry is going that way as well, with a lot of entrepreneurial activity of buying your business insurance online, but also helping the tools and solutions that enable agents and brokers to better serve those customers with more responsive, accurate products that cover what they actually need at their business. And I think, we didn't talk about it today, but, indemnity products versus financial guarantee products or parametric insurance, right? Where again, simpler, your policy is written to say, if X happens, then I will pay you Y, right? There's no claims workflow. You're not waiting for that to get adjudicated. It's instant. So I think with all of the new technology capabilities and API connectivity and groups really coming together with the data, with exchanges of data and capabilities, that we will see a more streamlined, quick, responsive interaction with the end insured. That's
interesting.
We'll time test this in a few years, and we'll see. Hopefully, I don't end up with egg on my face on that. But I think from the consumer standpoint, we're moving towards simpler, more digestible, faster interactions with an insurance.
And that's got to be, the simplicity's got to be better in some cases for the insurers too, right? Because then you don't end up with like, the long-term care debacle or the variable annuity crazy index linked stuff that nobody knows how to. The consumer and the insurance company both have no idea. Yeah. That's great. Okay, so simplicity and sort of tailor fit insurance just for me. I like the sound of both of those things. That's great. Well, let's wrap it there. This has been another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I am your host, Chris Wells, and I have had the pleasure of speaking with Michelle Gouveia from Sandbox Industries. Michelle, thank you so much for enlightening us.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah, of course.